Hello, hello. We're back on House and Fata Morgana. I just realized I clapped so close to the microphone. I'm so sorry if that was loud. Really great start. Sorry, but hi, happy Pride. Gonna do a really quick little rant. It is a great time to learn about history, so go check that out. And as a reminder, I think I've said this on stream several times now, but you are always welcome here, and you are valid and all that. So I know that was really brief, but I figured instead of going on and on for 5 minutes about something I hadn't rehearsed, we'll keep it short and sweet. Cool. If you are new, I'm Kels. And yeah, you'll hear me talk a lot. Let's sort of recap as to what happened last time and then get into tonight. So, Morgana and Jacopo bantered about sorting out her life, like trying to confront her stepdad and skipping school. They admitted to seeing each other in their dreams and wondered about having met before. The witch called Morgana's happiness a lie and taunted that she deserves her scars from the past sins she's starting to remember. She finally recalled Jacopo locking her up and fully. I don't know why this game makes my PlayStation crash constantly. All right. While that's doing it, she finally recalled Jacopo locking her up and fully reawakened her past lives, and his past memories came back when she called him out. It's an even shorter stream today. Morgana ran out and begged for Michael to save her, but her stepdad found her. She finally stood up to him, but he hit her, and Jacopo had to call out his abuse. Morgana reluctantly went back with her dad to keep the cops out. Hey, you want to turn on this time? There we go. But now she knows how sincere Jacopo is about wanting the best for her when she found a list he made of support services she can reach out to. A year later, Morgana moved into Michael and Giselle's apartment and immediately recalled them. After a few months as friends, she started to act like a freeloader, treating Giselle as her maid, so we called out her neat act and offered support to get off her butt and meet the others. Reuniting with Maria brought out her cute side, and Maria told us to get hitched already. Morgana helped us make vegetable soup for dinner and let us bring it down alone. Maria got Giselle drunk and she went into maid mode, babbling about wedding plans. At Giselle's party in mid June, Nellie and Mel showed up first. Nellie committed to not interfering if Mel does fall for a girl after he recognized Morgana, except for the fact that unless she's not worth it, she's not good enough for Mel, in which she was going to kill her. Um, Giselle felt awkward seeing Yukimasa with Pauline. Morgana and Michael are baffled that everyone reunited, and she ran into Jacopo when she tried to escape the party. He tried to let her go, but he loves her too much. Morgana revealed that she shared his remnant's dream and he invited her to their homeland. She's bringing Maria with them, so the road trip is chaotic. Nellie and Mel came back to England with pâtissier work on the brain. Let's see. Pauline and Yukimasa talked about violent movies not getting him off, and she offered to let him hurt her, but he's holding back, and Michael and Giselle finally had their wedding. And I'm still so happy about that. I sat there and thought about that like 3 times in the last couple days. So we are wrapping this up. All we've got left are the short stories, and we've already taken a look at one of them. So let's get into this. All right, the vast majority of happenings in this world are not recorded in stories. Either too trifling or adding no meaning to our lives, these facts of life are coldly cast aside with only the tiniest sliver deemed worthy enough. Each day we relentlessly discard unnecessary fragments of our lives. Fragments forever lost to the ether, and we continued. I still can't get through that in time. All right, Tales of Florida, not their moment in the limelight, left to waste away in obscurity. I'm doing really good at the reading thing again. Okay, so we did the Revenant's Dream. So I think we're just gonna start from the top. There's 2 pages, or 1 3/4. So we're just gonna start from the top and go down. All right, a slow killing poison. I don't know if these are arranged in any way either, so I would hope they're chronological, but I don't know. The maid spoke little of what happened after the white-haired girl's disappearance in the era of roses, for she believed the rest of the tale insignificant, of no value to share with her listener, the white-haired girl herself. Thus, her role as storyteller ended with the girl's departure from the stage. And while the other characters' stories continued on, they were cut from the script, afforded not their moment in the limelight. left to waste away in obscurity. 1. A slow killing poison. Yeah, I assume those two must be connected, the one with the 1 and the one with the 2. I don't know why you would cut them in two, since you could just put them together, but I don't know. I don't know. Well, we will find out. Arthur Baldwin was vexed. Shortly before they were to be married, his engagement with Nellie Rhodes. Oh shit, I forgot who Arthur Baldwin was. I hated this man. Eldest daughter of the Rhodes family, had been broken off. He understood well enough why it had happened, and had it been his decision, he likely would have made the same one, so Arthur's dissatisfaction lay not with the dissolution itself. Nor did he bear any fault in it. His bride-to-be had simply been gripped by madness. I hear she attacked an Abigail. Oh, I was told she took one of her eyes out. Even worse, she killed her. Those are but rumors, my dears. The truth is so much more dreadful. I used to work at the Rhodes Manor, you see, and the young lady, she... Initially, Arthur was skeptical of what people were saying. He assumed the tales were being exaggerated as they spread. But when the head of the Rhodes family came personally to deliver reparations and formally nullify the engagement, he gave Arthur a rough overview of what had happened. It was apparently true that Nellie had assaulted an Abigail, and it was true that she spent most of her time in her room now, looking pale and sickly and drained of her spirits. And then, when he said outright, a demon's possessed her, Arthur had little choice but to believe something wasn't right. And to top it all off, Nellie's older brother Mel ran off to be a priest, presumably to get away from everything. Nellie's father implored Arthur to remain discreet about her situation, not that he had any intention of going around and spreading personal details about her life. However, rumors have a nasty way of slipping through the tiniest of cracks, sneaking about through the dark like a seasoned cat burglar. What nobles like to refer to as social gatherings were in practice more like gossip gatherings, and in short order, the Rhodes family's eldest daughter was the talk of high society. Incidentally, the painter whose downfall eventually culminated into this tragedy was also strangled by the noble grapevine, though Arthur had no way of knowing as much. Perhaps the painter's curse extended beyond the girl's hair color, and the Rhodes family was destined to be brought to ruin by the gossip of their fellow aristocrats. One evening, Arthur decided he would sneak into the Rhodes' manor. He had requested visitations with Nellie on numerous occasions, but had been turned away every time. She's in no condition for company, was what they kept telling him, which left him no choice but to see her uninvited. The aroma of the roses seemed more overpowering at night than during the day, and he wasn't sure whether it was just his imagination. The nagging irritation it caused in him, however, was not only in his mind. Arthur instructed his coachman to wait on the street a little ways out, and made the rest of the way to the manor on foot, entering through the garden. As he waded through the sea of roses, he clenched his teeth. Arthur preferred restraint when it came to both gardening and girls. What am I doing with my life? How did I end up here, sneaking about trying to find that obnoxious little girl's room? You know what? You didn't deserve her anyways. Fuck you, Arthur. Arthur had few pleasant memories of this rose garden. The Rhodes and Baldwins had a long history, so as a child he would often find himself left here to play while the adults did business. It was him, Nellie, who could never seem to stop hanging off of her brother, and Mel, the textbook definition of a well-behaved aristocrat boy. Your poetry sucked, Artie. Not once had he managed to step into the siblings' private world. There was only room for the two of them, leaving Arthur stuck out there all by himself. The best he could manage was a little teasing now and then. For example, saying her hair looked like the color of fallen leaves. I never asked for this engagement anyway. Who would even want to marry a girl who thinks herself some kind of princess? Not me, that's for sure. But still. He had known her practically his whole life. Of course he was going to be curious when people were saying she had gone mad or been possessed by a demon. He was just curious, he told himself as he drew nearer to Nellie's window. The curtains appeared to be drawn. He couldn't see anything inside, so he crouched down to pick up a few pebbles to toss over the veranda. A few soft taps rang out in the night before the curtain finally shifted. A few moments later, a young girl stumbled out into the moonlight. Despite already knowing the answer, his first thought was, who is that? He wanted to smack himself, but at the same time, it was hard to deny the discrepancies between the girl standing there and the girl of his memories. The moonlight seemed to give her flaxen hair a ghostly bluish tint. It fluttered in a passing breeze, and Arthur felt something about her he had never before. She's so pretty. Whoa, slow down. What's wrong with you? Pretty? That self-centered, spoiled little brat? There wasn't a trace of the rambunctious Nellie he knew to be found. She stood there by the veranda's railing, gazing vaguely off into space like a pensive spirit. It wasn't at all what Arthur had expected to see when he came calling. He assumed she would be nothing but skin and bones, haggard and unsightly. Now, Lady Nellie, do you not think it rude? Do you not think it rude to not at least greet me? We were engaged, as you might recall. Her eyes still unfocused, Nellie turned her gaze down towards where Arthur stood. It was a reaction, but still he felt as though she had snubbed him, which did little to alleviate the irritation building up since he had arrived. Look, it's like a scene right out of your beloved Romeo and Juliet. Not that I'm here enthusiastically, of course. Mumbling complaints to himself, Arthur climbed a nearby tree, leaping from a branch onto the veranda. And there she was, within arm's reach but as distant as ever. Still, he could see nothing in her eyes. Hello? Say something already, would you, Nellie? Perhaps she really had lost her mind, just not in the way he had been led to believe. Arthur spent a few moments pondering how to proceed. He didn't consider himself a model gentleman like Mel, not even slightly, but he wasn't so crass as to laugh it off either. You certainly are quiet tonight, aren't you? I'm not sure how I'm supposed to act when you're like a completely different person. Every time you open your mouth, I want to sew it shut. You're always complaining. Nothing's ever good enough for you. But right now, I just want you to say something. Anything. How am I supposed to know what's going through your head if you don't tell me? Or is there just nothing at all? Nellie's gaze glided past Arthur and to the rose garden behind him. Nellie, are you listening to me? He tried again and again to get her attention, calling her name, waving his hand in front of her face, gently tugging on her hair. But all his attempts were fruitless. She simply stood there, lifeless, a well-crafted doll. He wasn't sure exactly how to describe how he felt. Slightly unsettled to start, a bit of pity to go with it, and a great deal of something yanking at his insides. Arthur had few pleasant memories with the Rhodes. That didn't mean he wanted to erase his past with them entirely, though. But looking at her, this empty shell, he felt almost as though those days were disappearing with her. How irritating. He knew the word wasn't right, but he went with it anyway, heaving a sigh after letting it linger in the air for a moment. It's always been like this. I'm no more than a buzzing insect to you. I can't stand this dreadful rose garden. It was exhausting having to come here again and again just because our families are close. I would try to say something, and you'd go running off into your darling brother's arms. Dearest Mel this, dearest Mel that. Is that all you know how to say? And he would just give you a half-hearted smile and pretend to be sorry for not paying attention to you. Yeah, well, bullet dodged. You know what? She dodged a bullet too. Like, fuck Arthur. I'm still mad. It's been so long since we saw this man, and I forgot how much I immediately had a hatred reaction to it. Arthur looked out over the garden as well. He was more talking to himself than he was to Nellie. I'm sure you don't remember, but one time I even brought you flowers. What were they? Some kind of anemone? Wow. I can do this today, I promise. Anemone, I think? But you wouldn't take them. You said the roses here were prettier, so you didn't need my flowers. What a miserable day that was. But standing beside this silent specter, melancholy overwhelmed any anger or frustration he might have otherwise felt. Perhaps it was because nothing he said managed to elicit any reaction out of her, or perhaps because he wished he had come out and said all this sooner. Unless expressed, feelings merely fester. I don't care one bit about you, and I mean that. It's only ever been about doing what's best for my family. Of course, Nellie was a perfect example of why you couldn't let everything out either. The gossip spoke not only of her attacking an Abigail, but of her destroying her relationship with her brother. And that was likely what had done the most damage. Knowing what he knew of Nellie in her younger days, Arthur had little trouble believing what the rumors said. That her affection for Mel went far beyond simple familial love. It was for my family. But that doesn't mean I wasn't going to try to get along with you. You probably don't believe me, since I never certainly acted like it, but I genuinely did want us to be on good terms. Yeah, I wonder why she wouldn't believe you. It just, you had to be the one who changed first. You were always treating me like I was worthless, like I meant nothing to you. Not like any of that would have even left an impression on your one-track mind, of course. But that's why I wanted you to take the first step. I'm not some wise old monk who can just turn my frustration off on command. Arthur let out another sigh. Do you think anything would have gone differently if I could have been more grown up? A gust of wind blew through, sending up a flurry of rose petals, carrying them up past the two of them and through the velvet curtains into Nellie's bedchamber. A faint smile crossed her lips. Arthur could only guess at what was going through her mind, what was reflected in her eyes. In her room, he could see several pairs of small children's shoes, a doll with its hair all neatly made up, a pile of sheet music drawn up for her by a respected composer years earlier, and toys carved from wood. The stop in music is scaring me. Like, the hell? It does definitely feel like one of those am I the asshole posts where the comments come to the everyone sucks consensus. Like, absolutely. Like, don't get me wrong, Nellie was not great, but also she was number one a kid. Like, she's only 14 when she gets engaged. And he was a dick. So, but yeah, she probably should have noticed him just a little bit more. Who really sucks in this? Mel. It was like he was looking through a window into the past. That was all he needed to know. He could have treated her like the princess she thought she was, and she would have gone down the same path. Nellie's eyes were on one person only. Arthur wasn't even a shadow on her peripheral. Your brother's still smiling for you in there, isn't he? And that was all she needed. After that night, Arthur stayed away from the roads and never mentioned the siblings again. Yeah, she didn't have to like him, but she didn't have to treat him like dirt either. So, yeah, everyone sucked. So, it was the best thing to do, he thought. He had his own life to worry about. But fate wouldn't allow him to avoid hearing about the family from time to time. About 4 years later, Nellie, who had apparently fallen ill, passed away at the young age of 18. The Rhodes held a small funeral service, which Mel did not attend. Arthur couldn't even begin to imagine what he, her brother, felt about it. But another three years later, Mel followed behind her. At the age of 24, he threw himself off the top of a church tower. According to those near him, he had been acting unusual in the months leading up to his death, claiming he could hear a woman's voice talking to him. If he had taken his life out of grief, 3 years seemed like too long of a gap. Perhaps it had built up over time, and that was how long it took to reach the boiling point. But that's not how it felt to Arthur. It felt like Mel had been guided there by a higher power. Or maybe pushed. And there was one other strange detail. He had died at exactly the strike of noon. As the bell rang its 12th toll. All right. Well, that was it. Exact. That's what I was about to say. Is, who's really the asshole here is the witch. Like, Nellie, you could possibly excuse as like being possibly somewhat pre-programmed, since like she was her future was designed to taunt Mel. But yeah. All right. Let's go into defectives. I don't know what that means. We'll find out. All right. I'm going to actually move myself so that you guys can see. We'll see if that. There we go. Okay. In the distant Hoi era, while the Tokugawa shogunate governed feudal Japan, Yukimasa Aida made his living far to the west, with little knowledge of what lay beyond the borders of his own native country. The land of the rising sun was an isolated nation, turning nearly everyone away save for traders from a few specific regions. And those restrictions applied equally to Japanese who had departed the country before they were put in place. Yukimasa was a third generation immigrant, having never once set foot in his homeland. And for that reason, as a child, he held a great adoration for the glorious nation described by his grandfather. And he was particularly fond of the katana passed down to him by his grandfather. Though it bore no name, the blade had a curiously bestial glimmer that entranced Yukimasa at first sight. See, he didn't really need any persuading, if I remember correctly, in his route. So, yeah, this is also the time period where Abby is her least innocent, since she was there trying to kill people. Yeah, yeah. The katana had belonged to Yukimasa's grandmother, but she had passed away before he was born. His grandfather described her as a skilled swordswoman, slight in frame but easily able to take down several men more than twice her size. After his grandfather passed and bequeathed unto him the blade, Yukimasa would from time to time see phantoms of a young woman drenched in blood. She had sharp, narrow eyes like him that looked more like his than even his parents. He felt almost as though his own reflection had stepped out of the mirror to cut him down. Or like they were a pair of killers, standing shoulder to shoulder. With each recurrence of the illusion, it took root even deeper into his soul, and Yukimasa grew ever more certain that one day he would cross over into her world, that he was simply holding in his true nature, that the beast dwelling within would break loose eventually. This tale, however, is of a time when he was still more man than beast. 2. Defectives. In the wake of framing and killing 2 crewmates for smuggling Spanish silver, Yukimasa was having something of an identity crisis. On both occasions, he had been smiling during the act, at least according to those who had seen him. If what they said were true, I can read. He wasn't conscious of it, but he didn't particularly doubt their words either. It was, in all likelihood, true. He had killed 2 men and enjoyed doing it. What unsettled Yukimasa most, though, was that his initial reaction was, I wonder what I'm going to become. Not a moment's concern for the men whose lives he had stolen. Once their still warm bodies hit the water, that was that. He held no nostalgia for the months they had spent out at sea together. He didn't care what kind of men they had been, or how much their families might grieve over the loss. Yukimasa wondered if that made him narcissistic. The lack of interest in anyone but himself seemed to fit the bill, but he didn't actually feel like he held himself in very high stature. He simply had this vague awareness of himself as a twisted, unsightly creature. On that day, the ship stopped at a small port town to replenish supplies and give the crew a few days to stretch their legs. They were still about 2 months out from Amsterdam, where his beloved awaited his return. What a hellish trip that was, a crewman, of Western origin naturally, muttered. If I never have to hear the word smuggle again, it'll be too damn soon. The way the whole crew's got their cheeks clenched after that's about driven me mad. Not blaming you, I mean, just how it is. Yukimasa shook his head and gave the man a faint smile. And in his mind, he chuckled about how no one could seem to see through his mask. The blame lay with him for much more than just the tension on the ship. Real shit job you got stuck with there. I don't know if I'd have been able to do it and keep a straight face like you did. Bet you're aching to let off some steam, ain't ya? You can be straight with me. I could certainly stand for some relief, yes. That much was true. However, Yukimasa meant it in a very different way. Come with me tonight, then. I know the perfect place to get you just what you need. The tanned seaman smirked, which was all Yukimasa needed to know what he was insinuating. He hesitated to come up with a response. Worried about Captain Asama? Don't, I ain't gonna tell him. Besides, it's not like he doesn't have needs too, you get me? Some of the crew knew that Yukimasa was romantically involved with the captain's daughter, and the man standing before him seemed to assume his hesitation stemmed from that. But Captain Asama would, as the seafarer had said, spend his time off satisfying his personal needs. That was just part of life on the sea. Everyone understood it, and no one considered it being unfaithful. Requiring a ship full of vigorous young men to save themselves for their partners, who they would often not see for months at a time, could in fact be considered a form of torture. There were a number of brothels scattered about the port town. For them, sailors were practically the ideal clients. A ship only stayed around for a few days to a week, meaning no time to get attached or cause other similar problems. About the only complaint a prostitute might have is that sailors tended to be quite pent up. They weren't the kind of client a new recruit could generally handle. Oh, clientele. I was trying to figure out what the hell that word was supposed to be. That settles it. Tonight. Grab something to eat, and then we'll meet up at... Yukimasa forced a smile for the man, who had taken his silence as a yes. But he wasn't worried about Captain Asama finding out or being unfaithful to Pauline. He simply wasn't sure how much he could trust the seaman's recommendation. And the last thing he wanted was to catch some kind of disease. Can we stop calling them seamen? Like, I know I'm 12, but... Yukimasa was paired up with a skeletal girl with faded brown hair, which she had done up so much it only served to emphasize the lack of anything elsewhere on her body. This is your idea of the perfect place? He couldn't deny his disappointment at his assignment, who boasted absolutely nothing of what he sought in a woman. Yeah, they also have a bad tendency to leave their condoms at home. It's fine. In fact, he was afraid he might snap her in half. As the other pairs heated up beyond the thin curtains, Yukimasa's interest plummeted. If a woman tried to seduce him, he would act in accordance with his base instincts, but otherwise, Yukimasa didn't have a particularly strong libido, so... You're not into this at all, are you? No, It's fine. You're not going to hurt my feelings if you want to trade me for another girl. I used to have a few regulars, but these days I've got nothing. Sooner or later, they're going to toss me out on my ass, and I'll have to resort to back alley quickies to make a living. You're the customer. You've got every right to complain to the manager about drawing the short straw. She sounded like a woman hanging from her last thread. I'm not going to cause any trouble for you. Well, aren't you sweet? Your loss, she said with a snicker. I object to being called sweet, but anyway, I stand out more than most, so if I make a scene, it's more likely to escalate. You even went out of the way to explain yourself, so I object to your objection. But you do have a point. You're from the Far East, aren't you? Don't see many of your kind around these parts, so it's no surprise you draw attention. You know what? I've changed my mind. Don't ask for another girl. Clients like you only come around once in a blue moon, so I'd rather not let you go. Let's both avoid making a fuss and stay here together. You make it sound like I'm some kind of exotic animal. You're cute when you scowl. We can find out if you're an animal later, but you certainly are exotic. You're not even going to pretend this is a business exchange anymore, are you? I mean, why bother? I'm just the leftover scraps that nobody wanted. Are we going to meet the Sharon reincarnation? I hope this isn't Sharon. Like, I want Sharon to have a happy life. I feel like she just got dealt a really bad hand. I really liked her. There was something oddly charming about her gleeful laugh combined with the stream of self-deprecation, which would have been less of an issue for Yukimasa had he become physically intimate with Pauline yet, because by comparison, this prostitute would look like nothing more than a couple of dried twigs tied together. But he wouldn't be able to see Pauline for another couple months. He was beginning to think this girl might just do the trick for now. Their ship was scheduled to stay in port for about a week. Although they would have to spend some time moving cargo on and off the boats, the stay was, by and large, a recreational one. It was early afternoon, and while much of the crew had gathered together to go drinking, Yukimasa was taking a relaxed walk along the shore. He was no less interested in exploring the unfamiliar port town as anyone else, but unlike them, he wasn't the kind of man whose first instinct was to go straight to the pub. They all jabbed at him for being stiff and tight-assed, none the wiser to the primal urges he kept buried within. And who would ever suspect it either? Who could watch him walk up to an elderly man fishing on the dock, ask, "How's the catch?" with a smile, and imagine a bloodthirsty beast lurked within? The man gave a lazy nod in return, adding, "Ain't half bad today." "You're a sailor, I'd wager. Am I right?" the man said as Yukimasa made to resume his walk. "You are." "Well, a warning for you then, outsider. You'd do best to stay away from any back alleys after dark. It ain't safe at night, nohow." Yukimasa gave the man a half smile, feeling somewhat patronized by his warning. He was plenty capable of discerning where the dangerous parts of town were, and he was confident in his ability to defend himself if someone tried to attack. "There's already been several victims." Yukimasa froze. "As in murders?" "Killed deader than dead. And they still ain't caught him neither. Wouldn't want any of our guests to end up next on the list." I miss Seedorf the Seafarer. I forgot that was his name. I'm over here like, is this where like his whole thing about beating up people in back alleys and reincarnation came from? Out of curiosity, how does he kill? The old man turned his gaze down, his face becoming a shadow against the clear blue ocean stretching out behind him. He dismembers them. Hard to imagine, eh? Cutting a person into a bunch of pieces. He don't discriminate neither. Man, woman, child, don't matter none. He's a sicko, a complete madman. And they ain't found no pattern to the victims neither. Nothing to say who he might be or who he might choose next. So don't think you're safe just because you're not from around here. Yukimasa could feel his vision narrowing, converging on a single point. Oh, he could imagine. He could imagine clear as the afternoon sky. And oh, how he wished that that could be. Well, look who it is. Fancy running into you here. A woman's voice dragged him back to reality. He felt like he had just been pulled up from the bottom of the ocean, and when he turned to face her, he must have still looked a bit dazed, judging from the way she raised her eyebrow at him. "Oh, let me guess. You don't recognize me, not all made up for work? It's me, the girl from yesterday." She held her hair up in an approximation of her previous night's hairstyle, to which Yukimasa gave an in feigned realization. "So, what are you doing wandering around here? Out here? What if this prostitute was the killer?" That would be fascinating. I would love that. Please let that be it. "Bored? Got nothing better to do?" He wondered if the woman was even capable of being less blunt, especially considering he had, technically, been her client the night before. "I'm just taking a walk." "Not much to see out here." "There's the ocean." "Don't you get enough of that when you're out on it?" "I'll never tire of the sight of the sea." "Is that so?" she said, followed by a softer, slightly exasperated, "I'll never understand guys." But a few seconds later, she gave him a big smile. "So, hey, you're not busy. Why don't you come to my place? I can throw together a bare bones little lunch." Again, "I'm taking a walk." And bare bones is hardly a convincing sales pitch. "I'm saying if you want a quality meal, pony up for some goods." Ah, so that was what she meant. Apathetic, but finding no reason to turn her invitation down, Yukimasa agreed to go along. This man just does whatever anyone asks him to. Like,
I've taken a liking to you, she had said. Stop by whenever you've got the chance, at least until you have to take off. I can treat you even better than when I'm on the job, and free of charge. What do you have to lose? So that's exactly what Yukimasa did. Seeing her became part of his daily routine. And the more time they spent together, the more he learned about her. She had once been married and planning to start a family, but money troubles led to debt piling on, which led to her husband running out on her. And with the entirety of their debt on her shoulders, she had to start working, which was how she ended up at a brothel. There we go. Fine, I'll take a mistress, whatever. Ah, she asked, so I guess I'll do it. As she told her story, Yukimasa showed a fair degree of sympathy, but she took the whole thing with a grain of salt. If anything, wow, if everything she said was true, she'd had a hard life indeed, but there was no guarantee it was. Yukimasa made certain not to be openly dismissive or skeptical, though, to play the good listener. There was one thing he could be certain of, though. He felt a tiny bit of solidarity in the woman's solitude. The sense she was missing something. The sense she had a hunger. The sense she had a hole that couldn't be filled. The sense that she was defective. We get on pretty well, don't you think? Maybe you could, I don't know,
Take me as your mistress? You've called it!
She sounded like she was only playing around, but still he responded with,
It's not wise to pair two defectives together.
What's that supposed to mean?
She said with a scowl.
Yukimasa's ship was to depart the following day. And that evening, the woman asked him to stay the night,
To which he was unsure how to react.
Don't you have work? I'll just say I wasn't feeling well.
It's not like anyone wants me there. But don't you need the...
I can survive taking one day off. I want to be with you. And with that, he could come up with no further objections. Regardless of what he did, he would be heading back out on the sea the following day, likely to never see the woman again.
So, rather than waste time debating her own life choices, it would be easier for everyone if he just let her do as she pleased.
Tomorrow, none of it would be his concern after all. He agreed, and she gave him a big smile in response. I'm going to make you a feast tonight, she said. You're paying, though. Yukimasa wondered if, perhaps, what she wanted most was to play like they were a real family.
That was probably it.
What she was missing in her life wasn't love or romance, but someone to sit around the table and enjoy a meal with. But that raised a new question. What happened after she'd had her fun? She found someone to fill the hole in her spirit, but it was fake and the hole wouldn't stay filled forever. Oh, I'm doing something terribly cruel to her, aren't I? There was nothing he could do about that anymore, though. Even if she were to ask him to stay, he didn't have that option. May I ask you something? He said. Yeah? How did it feel when you lost your family? Your sanctuary? You sure know how to go right for the heart. I apologize. I don't want to think about anything that might bring my mood down. If you want to know what it feels like, experience it for yourself. Find yourself a girl and get her to run off on you. Seemingly taking his silence for discomfort, the woman let out a soft laugh and said, But I don't want you to have to go through that. Supper was a seafood stew. Hardly a feast, but there was a homely warmth to the meal. Something she had likely honed over the years. When a man is incomplete, missing a vital part of what makes him human, what becomes of him? Does he lash out? Does he lose the will to live? Does he forget what kind of man he is? Yukimasa didn't think he fit into any of those categories. In the middle of the night, Yukimasa silently slipped out of bed and made his way for the door. Wait. But he didn't make it 2 steps before the woman grabbed him by the sleeve. She must have been awake the whole time. There was no way she could have noticed him leaving otherwise. Don't do this to me. I've had more than enough of waking up to an empty bed. And I'm not going to let it happen again. Not this time. You may think sneaking off without a word is the cleanest way to end things, but you're wrong. Stay until morning. Let me say a proper goodbye. No, I wasn't. You weren't what? Of course you were. I don't care if you think of me as free tail for the week you're just going to forget about when it's over. I'm using you for my own personal satisfaction too. But the one thing I won't stand for is you just up and disappearing on me. You're not the one who's being left behind, so you don't understand how worthless and pathetic it makes you feel. It hurts. It hurts so much more than anything else you could do. Don't leave me. That that was probably what she wanted to say more than anything else. The loneliness that had created the hole in her heart was making waves, and this was the real desire that lay hidden in her words. She didn't want to be alone anymore. I'm not leaving. I'll be back. There's something I wanted to give you, and I was just going to get it. And what would that be? It's my way of showing gratitude. I think the word you're looking for is present.
Yes, that. Girl, you are probably going to end up dead. That is my guess at the moment. A stab, yeah.
Her eyes were locked with Yukimasa's. She was staring through the darkness in an attempt to ascertain how truthful he was being. After 10 or 15 seconds of glaring, she let him go. I won't be long, he said with a smile. As he walked down the moonlit port, Yukimasa's mind raced. No one truly understands themselves more than superficially. Some say you know yourself best. Others say it's quite the opposite. The concept of the self is full of such uncertainties, contradictions. Yukimasa suspected he was suppressing himself with his self. So, while he had a reasonable grasp on who his outer self was, his inner self was a complete mystery, and that fact sometimes sent a chill down his spine. Who was he? What did he want in life? Which self, which of his desires was the real him? Self, 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 self. He felt sick. About 30 minutes later, he was back. Within seconds of him knocking on the woman's door, it was open. She must have been waiting there, anxious for his return. The woman met his eyes, gave him a pouty smile, and then slowly lowered her gaze. Her eyes gradually widened, shooting up and down as they did. I've never been very good about thinking of anyone other than myself. I consider myself proficient enough at conversation, but if I'm not careful, my mind always seems to drift back to myself instead of focusing on who I'm talking to. That said, I've spent a great deal of time thinking about you. The woman took a step back. Yukimasa followed. And I've concluded this is the best way for me to make you happy. She didn't even have time to let out a shriek. There was only the sound of steel slicing flesh, metal grinding against bone. As the nameless katana pierced the woman's breast, her mouth flapped open and shut, while her eyes were held wide open, affixed on the man standing before her. Faint gasps escaped her lips and sputters. Perhaps she wanted to scream. Perhaps she wanted to cry and shout and say this wasn't what she wanted. But there wasn't enough strength left in her emaciated body to do either. As blood spilled down the side of her lips, she mustered the last scraps of her strength, and with it, she forced out her parting words, carefully chosen and enunciated to ensure he heard every last one. You pitiful man. What kind of hopeless fool would throw their life away just to kill a worthless prostitute? She cursed him as her life slipped away. Yukimasa, however, let out a laugh and muttered, Don't you worry. I still have enough control to not act sheerly on impulse.
Hey, Yukimasa, you hear about that whore you've been banging? She was killed last night, cut to pieces like the others. I swear, it's like trouble follows you wherever you go. Lord almighty, stay away from me, man. I don't want to catch the attention of whatever evil spirit's taken a liking to you.
That was probably best. He would be safer keeping his distance. Yukimasa gazed idly out at the port town as it faded out of view. He then turned towards the ocean, that vast, familiar blue expanse. The waves against the boat sounded vaguely like splashing blood. Can I ask you something, Pauline? Yukimasa said in the warm embrace of his sweetheart. Anything! What would you think if I were actually an unspeakably evil man? Huh?
Where'd that come from? She asked with a smile, evidently assuming the question was in jest. Idle curiosity.
Well, bad people come in all shapes and forms. What sorts of bad things would you do?
How about committing murder? Deceiving people. The words that came from Yukimasa's mouth were not the ones he'd prepared to say, which came as a surprise even to him. Why had he not been able to say what he had wanted? What reason could he possibly have had? Did he not want to raise any suspicions? No, that wasn't it. Is being dishonest really evil? Sure, it's bad if you lie to cheat someone out of their money or cause them pain, but no one's perfectly honest with everyone they meet. I try to be straightforward and truthful as best I can, but I'm sure I slip up from time to time.
So listen to me, Yukimasa.
Pauline gave a wide, infinitely loving smile.
Even if you have something to hide, something you're ashamed to tell me, that won't change how I feel about you. You've got nothing to worry about. Besides, I plan to be with you for years and years to come. You want to know what my life's dream is?
I'd love to.
My dream is to live out a long, quiet life with you. I don't need anything extravagant, just an ordinary life, slowly growing older, having 3, maybe 4 children. We'd never fight, and eventually, before I knew it, I'd be an old lady thinking, it was an uneventful life, but it was the best I could have asked for. That's the life I want. And what about you?
Ah, now he understood. He didn't want to risk cracking the foundation she provided him, the sanctuary she formed around him. Yes, I too wish for a peaceful life with you. Exactly. Pauline's just like, I like a bad boy. It's fine, Yukimasa. She would have been okay with it. All right, let's go into the painting's ramblings. We gonna see George? Three, the painting's ramblings.
Why, hello there, Giselle.
Doing your rounds again? Such a diligent young lady you are. You could get away with cleaning this place once every couple decades and no one would be the wiser. What? You're not Giselle. That's someone else? Oh, no. You're just the maid. And who am I, you ask? Well, this is quite the pickle. What on earth could have happened while I was dozing off? You think you're just a maid and you think you're the witch at the same time? You've forgotten just about everything, and I don't think anything I say is going to fix that. You do seem a bit mellower now and not so constantly miserable. Wasn't sure what to say to you before, or if I should say anything at all. So I didn't say much out of consideration for you. Not that you could really tell from looking at me, I guess. If forgetting takes some weight off you, then maybe it's for the best. Not that I think you should forget, and not that I want you to forget about Michael, but I won't blame you for choosing not to spend God knows how much longer agonizing over it. Nothing wrong with abandoning ship, especially considering how long you've spent on it. And hey, it hurt me too, seeing you in so much pain, so we both come out on top here, I guess. What a kind painting, you say. Well, thank you kindly. But the truth is, I'm not nearly as upstanding a guy as people think I am. And it was us Bollingers that turned your life upside down and caused you all that misery and suffering. Yeah, I know, the first dumbfounded smile was testament enough. Everything I say is going in one ear and out the other. Which means I'm free to say whatever I want. By the time tomorrow rolls around, you'll have forgotten all about the curious talking painting you chanced upon today. So I'll start with this. It's a huge relief to see you smiling again. It's not the smile of someone right in the head, I can see that much, but it's a lot easier on the eyes and the heart than how you were before. Like I said, I'm a real winner. I'm not particularly concerned about putting up appearances here. Call me heartless if you will. You wouldn't be wrong. George, you're a painting. Can you do anything other than putting up appearances? I'm asking legitimately. I'm not going to pretend I'm some saint, but at the same time, I'm not going to play like I'm a cackling villain either. If there's one thing I don't want people to see, though, it's me looking weak. I'm the laid-back guy without a care in the world. That's what I want people to see when they look at me. My big brother was your standard cookie cutter, you can count on me for anything kind of brother. I mean, that ended up not being the case, but he sure looked the part. And Michael, he always looked up to Dee, went to him for everything, gave him all his love. Dee was tall and well built, muscular. Everything about him screamed manly man. And I kind of admired that too, though not nearly as much as Michael did. I became a painter in part because I didn't want to follow in my brother's footsteps. Not to say I don't like painting, I love it, but people weren't going to be inclined to compare us as often. I didn't have to be as fit as him, or as good at chess. I had my own thing to be good at, art. I couldn't beat him in his own game, so I beat him at mine. And my whole not a care in the world deal was probably, at least on some level, a shield against having to admit I couldn't compare. If we were a few years further apart, maybe I could have just had the same admiration and respect for him as Michael. But there's not much getting past that boyish competitiveness when you're so close in age. I know I've been rambling at you for a while already, but would you mind sticking around a little longer? Great. I've got an old story I'd like to get off my chest. This is something I was planning to take to the grave, and something I don't think Giselle ever needs to know. But, well, you say you're not Giselle anymore, and I'm already in the grave, so what the hell? I'm just going to talk to myself for a bit here, and if you'd kindly forget anything you may overhear, that'd be lovely. Back before I became a painting, I was the head of the Bullinger family, though I spent most of my time painting. It really wasn't the job for me, though, a guy who half-assed his way straight through life, so I left all the businessy stuff to my wife, Amy. God, I hated her. Having war flashbacks already. Now, she was a real capable girl. If she'd been born a guy, she would have made one heck of a diplomat. Possibly even caught the king's eye. Before we were married, she'd had a bit of a fling with Dee, which she felt real bad about later. Probably didn't help that I had a tendency to bring it up from time to time. Not all the time, just occasionally. But that aside, she was a faithful, hardworking partner. It didn't take long for us to become known as the dope and his able bride, to which Amy would always interject, "George is a very capable man, thank you very much." Now that probably makes it sound like I just shoved all the work of running the house onto her, but in truth, she wanted the job. She quite enjoyed it, and who was I to complain? It also meant I didn't have to deal with one of the family's more significant dilemmas. Namely, my mother. Not to be crass, but Mom was not quite all there. She'd always been a bit of a nervous wreck, and it didn't take much to set her off, but it was what happened with Michael that finally broke her. Mom had, I guess you could say, a very particular image of what she wanted Michael to be, and he ended up not fitting that image. Now you're probably thinking, that doesn't seem like such a big deal, but it is. I just can't tell you why. Michael has to be the one to tell you. Anyway, some bad stuff went down, and at the end of it all, Mom was constantly hovering over the edge. Dad gave up on her entirely, and I just wasn't sure how to approach her, so I kept my distance. Amy was the only one in the family who would actively engage with Mom. So while she had betrayed me once, I had come to trust Amy again. We had a couple kids, I turned into a doting father, and life was swell. All my problems swept under the rug. Mom's condition, Michael. I left it all to Amy and enjoyed a pleasant, carefree life. But then Giselle, or I guess you're just the maid now, not long after, Michael died. My oh my. Oh wow, you really aren't Giselle anymore, huh? So back to my rambling. Michael died, and I got furious at Dee over it. But I keep coming back to that. Who really deserved the brunt of the blame in that situation? It's nice and comfy to sit back and do nothing. You can throw blame around all you want. It wasn't your fault after all. You're not the one who killed him, you know? It wasn't long afterwards that Dee died too. Killed on the battlefield. I was told he died a very noble death, but I couldn't help but think he was in a hurry to escape. Listening to the news, I kept telling myself I shouldn't have snapped at him like that. I shouldn't have blamed him. Dee had to choose between protecting Mom or protecting our brother, and he settled on Mom. He was too hard-headed to come up with a way to protect them both, though even if he had, it was too risky. He served the church directly, and we were all under its thumb. If word spread that one of our own had supposedly sold his soul to the devil, that would be the end of the Bollinger family. I wouldn't have escaped unscathed either. Losing both of my brothers in quick succession crushed me. And as I started breaking down, it was, you guessed it, Amy who comforted me.
It's terrible what happened, but it's not your fault. That was around when I began sensing something was off.
I mean, she'd had a thing with Dee. You'd expect she would have been bawling her eyes out right alongside me. So why on earth was she so calm? But I didn't press her on it. I knew I wouldn't get an answer, even if I did. And I also didn't have much of a right to question Amy when I was pushing all my problems onto her. Doubly so knowing that opening my dumb mouth was what had done this to Dee in the first place. And before long, we went back to our normal routine.
About 8 years after Michael's death, Mom was gone too, and the Bollinger family was down to me, Amy, and our 2 sons. I had started teaching the boys how to paint, and I loved every minute of it. And then one day, I started feeling unwell. My fingers would get kind of tingly, such that holding a brush for long periods of time would hurt. So gradually, my time spent both teaching and painting dwindled, and even leaving the manor became difficult.
Is she poisoning him? Like, is she actually the reason why everyone died? Because if I have more reasons to hate her, I will. Like, I'll just hate her more. Maybe she's the true villain in all of this.
At first, I thought it was just a little strange, nothing to be worried about. But then it started getting real bad, and I'd be stuck in bed for days at a time. We called the doctor to look at me, but he couldn't find anything wrong. Amy said I must be overworking myself, and she made me these nice, hearty meals, hoping to bring back my energy. But my condition only got worse. Eventually, I started losing my appetite. But Amy, she insisted I eat anyway, or I would never get better. So you know what I did? I tossed out the meals she made when she wasn't looking. I sent my younger boy out to the town to buy me food in secret, and for a while I ate that instead of Amy's meals, making sure it looked like nothing had changed. And after a week or two, the tingling in my fingers started going away. I could only laugh and grit my teeth, and then cry my eyes out. I made a life with this woman, trusted her, and then she goes and does this. Anger and sorrow were drowned out by raw heartbreak. My firstborn, he was getting to be about the age he could take over, which is why I had used my younger son to run errands for me. I couldn't be sure the two weren't working together. I was at a total loss. What are you supposed to do when your wife's trying to poison you to a slow death? Even now, I'm not sure what the right course of action in that situation would have been. Maybe I could have banished her, had her punished. But remember, I was only head in name. She handled everything, and there was no way I would have been able to pick up the pieces after throwing her out. And if my suspicions were correct, and my older boy was in on it too, getting rid of Amy wouldn't have solved anything. What then? Spend the rest of my days living in fear of my own family? I was, by that point, worn pretty thin, both physically and emotionally. Every thought led me to the worst possible outcome. I couldn't, for the life of me, come up with a workable solution. Eventually, I got it into my head that it was punishment, that I deserved it. Obviously, what Amy was doing wasn't right, but my hands weren't exactly clean either. Maybe Mom could have recovered if I'd looked after her. Maybe Dee would still be alive if I had put myself in his shoes instead of just snapping at him. Maybe if I had given everyone the care and attention they deserved, Michael wouldn't have had to die. Burying your head in the sand doesn't absolve you of responsibility. And when I finally realized how great a sin inaction was, it was far too late. I'm dumb, short-sighted, and I hated myself for not figuring that out sooner. It should have been stupidly obvious what my action and inaction were doing to the people around me. I should have seen all this coming. Yeah, Amy had betrayed me, but she wasn't the only one guilty of that. When I was going through Michael's stuff after his death, I came across a painting that had been torn to shreds, that I had made. By refusing to use my head, I had done something that denied his identity. And he left this world still carrying the pain I had caused him. By the time I had come to that conclusion, I wondered why I was even alive at all. I couldn't blame anyone for wanting me dead. So I started eating Amy's meals again, knowing good and well it would likely kill me. I didn't stop sending my younger boy out, though, just not for food. I also strongly encouraged him to move out and become a court artist. Then I started painting again. It was going to be my final piece. Every day, the tingling in my hands spread a little farther. My breathing grew a little more labored. I was afraid I might not finish while I was still able to get out of bed, but I somehow managed. It was the most harrowing experience I'd had painting something in my entire life. True to her facade, Amy stayed at my side until my last breath. She held my hand tight, giving me a strained smile. It didn't occur to me at the time, but Amy always seemed to be smiling, no matter what. In a way, it's kind of impressive how she managed to keep the loving wife act up while simultaneously loading me up with poison. Tell me, Amy, how deep did your poison flow? When you were looking after Mom, did you talk about Michael? Knowing you probably figured out he was still alive. And I bet you read his final letter to her. It was you who pushed her to set everything in motion, wasn't it? There were so many things I wanted to say, but I stayed my tongue and made these my parting words. I loved you so much, Amy. So I ask you this. Keep my last painting in memory of me. I have no idea if she actually did as I requested, but the last thing I saw before I passed was her nodding, a smile on her lips. The paint I used to make it, I mixed with a special something I had my younger boy go out and buy for me. A substance that, according to what I was told, slowly dissolves into the air, making it toxic. Yes! There we go, plot twist. She didn't intentionally poison him. She just really sucks at cooking. And it has some sort of reaction with the paint as well, turning it almost black. I'm quite proud of how it turned out, if I do say so myself. It was a gorgeous landscape painting. Sorry for rambling at you so long. That's the end of my story. Uh, were you even listening to me? What? You have to go clean the fireplace? Oh, all right. Don't let me keep you. Just please make sure you forget everything by tomorrow, all right? I'm counting on you. I know. Why even say anything, right? I wanted to tell someone. I just don't want anyone to actually know about it. The human heart's a big ball of contradictions like that, you know? You don't? Oh, okay. Well, see ya. It'll be another few decades before you come by again, I imagine. And when you do, will it be our first time meeting again? Will you even be able to hear my voice anymore by then? Maybe it'd be best if I forgot everything too. Who knows? So long, maid. And take care. When an angel comes to judge me, how will his scales tilt? Towards forgiveness or towards reckoning? But I don't want it to be an angel who makes that decision. No, you don't have to be an angel. You don't have to be an angel at all. There we go. Morgana just shows up to beat him in the head with the key. Ah, poor George. All right, we did the Revenant stream. I think it was two House and Fata Morgana streams before. So if you missed that one, go check that one out. So I guess we'll do one, Lost. Ooh, we get a different background. One, Lost. Master, I was wondering if I could ask for some time off. One autumn afternoon, a young maid, stood in Jacopo's study requesting a vacation, effectively signaling her intent to quit. He lit a cigar with practiced motions, took in a deep breath, and then blew the smoke out in a long, slow stream. Again, he thought, making it sure not to let it show on his face. What's your reason? He asked. Not satisfied with how you've been treated. I feel we've been quite generous. Oh, no, not at all, she said. In fact, you've been much better to me than my previous house. I have no complaints about the treatment I've received. Then why? If I knew you would quit so soon, I never would have hired you in the first place. But you've just started showing some improvement. Now all that time and money's gone to waste. I'm sorry. I'm asking for a reason, not an apology.
he said, his voice a mixture of exhausted, irritated, and scolding that only made the girl recoil further.
He let out another heavy sigh. Are kids these days all that soft?
Christ, he thought. Another complaint to add to the mountain built up and locked inside.
It's because, um,
Out with it. You know I don't like it when people aren't straight with me.
the young maid looked up at her master apprehensively. His dark brown eyes seemed to pierce straight through her soul, making her feel like she was being squeezed from the inside out. Other maids had told her he was a lot softer than he used to be, but she couldn't imagine that at all. He was a rich, unmarried, testy man in his 30s. Everything about him was terrifying. He's not even that old, Jacopo, dude. You become a crotchety old man at the age of 30. And despite that, she was willing to face up to him and beg to quit because there was something even worse in the mansion. The head maid scares me.
Jacopo raised an eyebrow. He had been expecting her to say he scared her. Did the head maid do something to you? He asked.
No, she didn't.
Then why? Ash fell from Jacopo's cigar. His irritation levels were rising.
The young maid looked up at him, fear in her eyes. Are you not scared of her too, master? Her appearance never changes at all.
The past few years, there had been an increase in maids quitting for vague, non-specific reasons, and he finally had his answer. When Jacopo purchased the mansion, he was 22 years old, taking the first step to expanding his family's influence to the new world. Expectations for him were high, and the pressure was almost suffocating, but he was still an optimistic, ambitious young man at the time. He had to do this, and he had to do it right, and it was that determination that allowed him to maintain the softness in his heart beneath the tough businessman demeanor. I'm just making up words now. Which was probably what led him to hiring the mysterious maid he found in his newly acquired estate. She was there when he first stepped through the door, calling him master and showing him around the property. Then, when she was done, she started working. Jacopo wasn't sure what to make of the woman, but she seemed to know what she was doing, and over time his suspicion slowly transformed into respect. Where's your master? He asked.
My previous master passed away, she said with a perfect smile. As the new owner of this mansion, you are my current master.
Assuming that meant the previous owner had just made no arrangements for her to transfer anywhere after he passed, Jacopo decided to let her stay and work as she wished. It was the responsibility of those with power to give work to those without, and he felt some satisfaction in taking her in. And for more than 10 years, she did that work almost flawlessly. And as long as she wasn't causing trouble, he didn't see any reason to pry into personal matters. How long she had been here, why she worked as a maid, or even who she was, he never bothered asking her anything. But now he was 35, and the maid still looked to be in her early 20s, just as she had the day he arrived. Jacopo leaned back in his chair, staring absently up at the ceiling, watching the smoke from his cigar waft upwards. The young maid who quit was long gone, probably living with her family. He'd considered introducing her to a new house, but he'd had so many maids quit on him he was running out of acquaintances to foist them on. There was a knock on the door. He leaned forward and said, "Who is it?"
It is I,
came the voice of the head maid. Are you going to try to fire Giselle? Because I don't know how that works. She just comes with the mansion. He called her in, and the woman who stepped through the door was indeed identical in appearance to 13 years prior. She floated gracefully to the center of the office, not making a single sound. He felt almost like he was watching a ghost. Well, you are. One of the younger maids left today.
Oh, one of the younger maids left today, she said. So I wanted to discuss with you how we should proceed redistributing the work.
I leave that to you, as always. I'll take care of finding a replacement.
Yes, master, she said with a bow.
Usually that would be the end of the discussion, and she would dismiss herself. But for some reason, she stood there unmoving, her deep, unreadable eyes of jade locked on his. What is it? He asked with a frown, mildly uncomfortable.
Have you considered dismissing me? She said,
wearing the same faint smile she always had on. Her face was like a perfectly carved mask.
I know that the maids have been quitting because of me. They've seen what I look like, and so rumors have been going around. The young girls are especially impressionable, so they are more likely to believe them. Have you considered dismissing me?
Jacopo tapped his cigar against the ashtray on the desk, then leaned back in his chair. He had considered it before, but he always came to the same conclusion. Every other maid could quit and it wouldn't slow down work as much as losing you.
Oh my, you think quite highly of me.
I know a capable worker when I see one, and you're more than capable. Hell, sometimes I wonder if you've been doing this job for hundreds of years.
My,
She said, her smile widening.
you jest. If I had been a maid for hundreds of years, that would make me a ghost.
Well, aren't you? He almost said. 5 or 6 years ago, he might have been able to chalk it up to good makeup, but 13 years wasn't something you could just hide like that. Jacopo didn't like talk of ghosts or the supernatural or any of that nonsense, but it had reached a point he simply couldn't think of any natural explanation. Why don't we have a little chat? I'd like to get to know a little about you. Her eyes went wide at his proposition. It had been a while since he'd seen her make a face other than that pristine smile, but even her surprise seemed artificial. With her, only the most restrained of emotions came across as genuine.
Is it going to rain tomorrow, master? You have never shown an interest in me before.
Indeed. You might want to set your overcoat out.
Now, what was it you wished to know?
What are you? He asked, not dancing around the question. The head maid gave a little giggle in response.
I am but a mere maid, master.
Yeah, that's about what I figured you'd say. Next, who was your previous master?
He was a very precarious man, drifting between man and beast.
The hell's that supposed to mean? Doesn't sound like a very good master to me. Did he even pay you?
No, sir. The house was in shambles at the time.
He let out another long string of smoke. What on earth was she speaking of? When he had brought the property, it was a little outdated, but otherwise in good shape. If he took her at her word, that would have had to have been at least 30 years ago. He wanted to press her further, but he knew she would just laugh and brush the question aside. So he took another puff of his cigar and asked, and who was before that?
The father of 2 adorable little children. He was rarely at the house, though, so his wife, son, and daughter served as my masters. They were a noble family, and they treated me quite well.
I didn't know nobility had lived here.
My, you believe me, master?
Oh, so you realize it sounds ridiculous, do you?
I understand that it may seem somewhat unbelievable to you, yes?
Well, I'm not completely taking at your word, that's for sure. This is just a casual conversation, after all. And I know we're all prone to some embellishment. So, who was before that?
The sibling's grandfather. He was the man who taught me how to be an abigail. I mean a maid. He loved roses, and I would often go out and admire the flowers with him.
Jacopo twitched at the word rose, a reminder of a great mistake he'd made years ago. He snuck a glance at the window, closed his eyes, and whispered, I see. All right, he continued. Who was before that?
Before him was...
Her gaze drifted upward, and then a rift formed in her persona, barely perceptible, but it didn't slip past Jacopo's notice. She still wore that eerily flawless smile, but hair-thin cracks had appeared in her jade eyes, allowing a carefully hidden murkiness to seep to the surface. For a split second, she seemed to be wearied to her core, looking out toward a faraway land she could never reach. And then it was gone just as quickly.
Before him was my dearly beloved, whose return I am still awaiting. For that reason, I hesitate to call them my master. I am terribly excited for their eventual return, though.
Sounds complicated, he said. I won't pry any further. Oops. She gave a wide smile. It was best to just leave it at that, he thought. They weren't friends. She was a maid, and he was her master. Next question. And I don't know how I never asked you this before, Jacopo said, letting it hang in the air for a second. What is your name? Saying it out loud only emphasized how ridiculous a question it was. He'd had this woman in his hire for 13 years without so much as knowing her name. With every other maid, he knew their name, age, family history, and more before they even signed the contract. But her, he never had a contract for her in the first place, which was unthinkable for a man who didn't even allow himself to make the smallest of mistakes. He had no idea how he could have let this happen. The only explanation he could think of was some unnatural power diverting his attention from it.
My. You can simply call me the head maid, as you have all these years.
I'm the master of the house, and I'm telling you to tell me your name, he said in his unflinching business voice. To which she gave him the same smile as ever. And then, when she offered him the name she believed to be her own, the air in the room seemed to crack.
My name is Morgana, master.
Jacopo's eyes went wide. While he wasn't as prone to shouting now as he had been in his emotionally troubled 20s, that was enough to push him over the edge. No, it's not, he yelled, unsure why he was so certain. There was another crack in the air between them. He lurched out of his chair, the force sending it toppling to the floor. She, meanwhile, only looked mildly surprised. No, that name does not belong to you.
Oh my. Then to whom does it belong?
It, she giggled. Every second he spent in the presence of that stony smile felt like a knife to the heart. By any reasonable measure, she was in the right. He had no place to deny someone else their name. But deep down, he just couldn't accept that name as belonging to the head maid.
Master, your hand.
He looked down to see his fist clenched around the still-lit cigar. The faint smell of burnt flesh rose up from it, though he didn't even feel the heat. Jacopo threw the crushed cigar to the ground. He had no idea why hearing a single name had sent him into such a frenzy, and not having an explanation only agitated him further. I think that's quite enough conversation for one day.
Please, just call me the head maid, as you always have. Now, do excuse me, master,
she said, and Jacopo could only watch in silence as she drifted out of his office. Jacopo's wife's bedroom was on the second floor, next to his own. Exactly, yes, hot maid. Exactly what we called her. Specifically, the room she had used in the early days of their marriage. In response to the information she shared with him by a good friend, which he trusted blindly, he had moved her to the first floor. And then, still unable to trust her, he had relocated her to an entirely separate building on the property. Her room on the second floor had remained untouched since her disappearance. Knowing she was sensitive to sunlight, he'd had heavy light-blocking curtains installed on the windows. And then, so the room didn't feel too gloomy, he'd had it furnished with white fabrics and light wooden furniture. And it was all still there. He included the room in the maid's daily cleaning duties, but many of them considered it a waste of time, so occasionally it would be neglected. In the past, he would have yelled at them for that, but now he just gave them stern reminders to do all of their assigned work. Which worked, though he could tell they weren't pleased. No one actually believed his wife would ever come back. After losing everything at the age of 26, he had set out in search of his missing wife, both with his own 2 feet and by hiring private investigators to look for her all across the globe. But even after so many years, he had nothing to show for it. Jacopo was beginning to think himself that she would never be back. But he wouldn't give up, for any reason. She had waited steadfastly for him, even after being broken mentally and spiritually. So he had an obligation to do the same. It wasn't worth much, but it was the least he could do for her, being the one responsible for hurting her so. He wished to have just one last chance, to see her again and atone for all the damage he had done. That was the only thing keeping him alive, now that he had nothing else. He stood quietly in his wife's bedroom. On the desk sat her phenakistoscope, yellowed over the years. He could still see her calling it her phenakis wheel with a gentle smile on her face. The same smile he had stolen from her and crushed under his feet.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
He could hear her voice as clear as the day they had gotten married. Hers was a soft, almost musical voice, the sound of which he would never forget.
It's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Michelle.
They first met on the day of their wedding, in the waiting room. She was wearing a veil at the time, so it wasn't until they made their vows that he saw the brilliantly affectionate smile on her face. A perfect match for her name, he thought, which came from the Archangel Michael. There was no one for whom an angel's name was more appropriate. But now the pieces had come loose with the head maid's earth-shaking proclamation, and they were coming together to form a different picture altogether. On the day Jacopo met his wife, somewhere deep down he felt as though he had known her sometime long, long ago, that he had been searching for her that entire time, and wanted nothing more than to bask in the light of that smile once more. And he would do anything to make sure she never lost it again. He saw a vision of a forlorn graveyard he had never seen before.
A young girl crouched before a makeshift headstone, turning back to look at him. Her smile, the same as the woman he had married. His eyes went wide, and he thought he was crying, but they were perfectly dry. He had long since lost the ability to weep. Was Michelle really her name? Jacopo's soul was bound by two sets of chains, weighed down by two great transgressions. He could feel them both distinctly. He understood how terrible the things he had done were, and that he deserved no redemption. A few days later, Jacopo was returning home from an on-site inspection and decided to pass through the garden on the way. A woman with long black hair crouched before a small flower bed, practically blending into the night. Hearing her master's footsteps, she stood up, brushed the dirt off her skirt, and gave him an ever-flawless smile. "Good evening, master. What brings you to the garden this evening?" "I was looking for you," he said. "Oh my! You've not been yourself lately, sir. Is it love? Because I'm afraid my heart already belongs to someone else."
"That's not funny. My heart's already taken too, and not by you." She giggled impishly.
"You are quite right, master. You would never tell the object of your affection I was looking for you."
"Hey, that's your boss you're talking to." Jacopo sighed, glancing over at the flower bed. The whole area had once been a magnificent rose garden, but he had ordered it destroyed 9 years earlier. Enough time had passed that he was able to grow out of his irrational hatred of flowers, though. And so it was the head maid's efforts that had brought it back to life, though on a smaller scale for the time being. "I apologize for what I did to the rose garden," he said, which elicited a bewildered stare from her. His gaze still averted, he continued, "You were fond of the roses too, weren't you? You mentioned coming out to look at the flowers with one of your previous masters. The nobleman, wasn't it? And now that I think about it, you were the one who looked after the garden the most as well." The head maid let his words hang in the air for a few moments, then gave him a quizzical look. What has gotten into him, she thought. But giving it a bit more consideration, she understood. He had had plenty of time to reflect on his mistakes, so perhaps an apology was not so surprising. She had grown so numb to the passage of time that she'd forgotten Jacopo was just a young businessman still getting his feet wet when they'd first met. So green that he had seen no trouble in hiring a mysterious maid who refused to talk about herself, eventually assigning her the position of head maid. Power, influence, business relationships, restless nights, constant betrayal. The pressures of the life he'd chosen had corrupted him. And then, in the wake of a great tragedy, he had managed to rid himself of some of that corruption. But only after he had lost the two people to whom that change would matter most.
"You need not apologize to me for anything," she said. "As a matter of fact, I bear some fault myself for failing to see the truth. I could have stopped you, master, and I could have prevented the destruction of the rose garden, too."
"You're just a maid," he said. "You were in no position to see anything I couldn't. I should have caught on to Maria's scheming sooner, and I should have trusted my wife."
"The truth I failed to see was not theirs. It was yours, master."
"Mine?"
"Yes. I failed to see the kindness and love in your heart."
Jacobo glared at the smiling head maid like she'd just told an offensive joke. "If that were true, I wouldn't have been so obsessed with money and personal gain. I wouldn't have killed my closest friend, and I wouldn't have abused my wife."
"Were your monetary desires truly as selfish as you claim?"
He clenched his teeth, turning away from her clear jade eyes. He felt like she was looking straight through him.
"You wanted the money," she said, "for your homeland, your family, your friends, your beloved. Am I mistaken?"
"Yes, you are," he spat. While it was true he had wanted the money for all those things, they were not his only motivators. He'd also wanted it for the power, to put himself on top of the world, safe from anyone who would betray him. But eventually, money and power changed from the means into the goal itself, sending him far off the path. Had he simply kept his eye on his true objective rather than obsessing endlessly over how to protect himself, he could have done more for both Maria and his wife. The head maid gave him a somewhat melancholy smile.
"If you so insist, master, then yes, I am mistaken. Nonetheless, it is all in the past now, and neither of us can take back the choices we made then."
Precisely. He could say it was all supposed to be for his wife or Maria, but what would that accomplish? Nothing. Allegedly noble intentions didn't excuse the kind of pain he had caused. He let out a short sigh, casting all those thoughts aside. Yeah, there we go. Across even eras and countries, Jacopo is still denying his harem protagonist fate. It's so funny. Like, he's supposed to be a harem protagonist, and Michael is supposed to be an angel. Yeah, I don't know what's going on through Giselle's head, since she thinks that Michelle, who we called Abby, was actually Michael. And to be fair, they looked very similar and used very similar names. I don't know. I don't know what she's doing. I was looking for you because I need you for something.
Yes, what can I help you with? She asked.
He turned his gaze towards the mansion, staring up a tall, long abandoned tower. It seemed almost radiant in the light of the full moon. Come with me. When Jacopo purchased the mansion, it had already gone through repairs to bring it up to a habitable condition. There was just one area that remained conspicuously in disrepair. Initially, he was planning to have the strange, decrepit tower demolished. There was no point in having it repaired only to sit unused, so he wanted to replace it with something actually useful, like a storeroom. But for some reason, which he still didn't understand, he could never bring himself to destroy the tower. The entrance to the tower was at the back of what he called the Second Great Hall, a mostly unused hall near the back of the property. I am more surprised that he didn't shove Abby back there rather than, into her own little cottage. There were rumors among the maids about the strange sounds and ghosts and blood dripping from the ceiling, going as far back as when Maria was still alive. Back then, he recalled telling her it was all nonsense and that he had no interest in you little women's little ghost stories, but the truth was, something did seem off about the hall. Not in a frightening or unsettling way, though. Being there, he felt smothered with guilt and shackled with sorrow. So he avoided going to the second great hall as much as possible. He hadn't even had lights installed in the hall, so stepping through the door felt like entering an entirely isolated realm of darkness. Jacopo and the head maid each carried oil lamps to light their way through the hall. At the far end stood a door not opened in countless years. Just an ordinary wooden door, though, with a simple lock, not a heavy metal one with a complicated 3-key lock. As he unlocked the door with his master key, the head maid whispered, "Why did you bring me here?" She considered following it up with, "Were you too scared to come on your own?" But even she couldn't bring herself to make light of things in the tower's presence. "I started paying more attention to you recently, after the last maid quit, and I noticed when you're not focused on something, you're looking towards one of two places, the former rose garden or this tower. So I thought it would be best to bring you with me when I came up to see the tower."
I see.
"No, don't bring her up here. She's got really bad memories here. This did not go well for us." The inside of the tower was as black as the abyss, even darker than the hall leading to it. The light from their 2 oil lamps revealed a long, long spiral staircase leading up. And something stirred in the long frozen heart of the head maid at the sight of that staircase. Jacopo set his foot on the first stair, pressing down on it hard in several places. It let out low creaks under his weight, but didn't seem in danger of breaking. That said, it was still an abandoned tower at night, and nobody knew they were here. This was a terrible idea that could go wrong at any time, and he knew it. Watching him slowly climb the stairs, the head maid's chest grew tight. For an instant, she wasn't seeing him, but someone else. They were holding her by the hand, running up and... "Why did you want to see the tower?" she said, trying to bring herself back to the present. "Hell if I know." She tilted her head. He almost never acted without a clear reason. "All I do know is I got the strangest feeling I would find something about myself here." "I see," she said, putting on a smile. "I too have a strange feeling that I will find something of myself here." Climbing the decaying staircase was a long, arduous process. Every so often they passed a window carved out of the stone wall. The light from the moon illuminated the path before them, guiding sinner and prisoner ever upward. After more revolutions than the head maid was able to count, the end was finally in sight. But there was one final obstacle before they could reach the door at the top. The next section of the staircase had collapsed.
Shall we head back? The head maid asked. If they were attempt to proceed, one of them would undoubtedly slip and take a fall straight down to hell. Surely Jacopo would realize there was no way forward and give up. But she was wrong. Leaning against the stone wall for support, he placed his right foot on what little remained of the next stair, and then he carefully guided his left foot to the next. Several slow, meticulous steps later, a chunk of stone gave out under his weight, tumbling downward into the abyss. But even that was not enough to stop his determined procession. She watched him in silence. She was not afraid that he might fall, however, because if that were to happen, then that simply meant he was fated to die here. It was an insignificant detail to her. As long as she was able to wait for her beloved to return, nothing else mattered. But he made it across the collapsed region unharmed. It seemed the mansion was not ready to be rid of him just yet. He turned around, shining his oil lamp over the gap. "You're free to wait there." "No, no," she said. "I will accompany you." She then gracefully lifted her skirt off the ground and followed the same crumbling path across the chasm he had. When she finally made it across, he gave her a smug smirk. "Damn, and here I thought you were going to float across like a ghost. I guess you really are alive." To which she responded with a little smile. They resumed their climb, soon reaching the top level of the tower. Beyond a door half rotten away sat a chamber with a single window high upon the wall. Through it shone a pillar of moonlight. The two of them entered the chamber, proceeding to the center of the room. The air inside was far colder than the autumn night they had left behind. It chilled them both to their bones, to their souls. Jacopo stood in place, gazing up at the window for some time. Then he walked up to the stone wall, dropping to his knees in front of what appeared to be nothing at all. He traced the irregular surface with his fingers, his hand slowly forming into a fist and dropping lifelessly to the hard floor. She could hardly see a trace of the powerful, wealthy businessman he was in that slouched form. He seemed so much smaller, on the verge of withering away. There we go, Giselle and Jacopo buddy cop road trip film. Uh, they did. I don't even think they got to interact in Reincarnation, so we got robbed. Did you find that something about yourself here? She asked, her voice carrying well in the cold, empty chamber.
"Yeah," he said, his voice shaking. There was far more contained in that single syllable than she could ever hope to discern. For a moment she thought he was crying, but from the glimpse she caught of his face, his eyes were dry, though he looked pale as a ghost. She stepped toward him, gently placing her hand upon his back. And then she spoke, breaking her personal vow to remain an observer. "If you wish to end your life here, I can offer you my hand." The man spun around to face her. There was neither anger nor surprise in his eyes, though. "Why would you say that?"
"I do not know," she said. "Seeing you there on your knees, the words simply came out. I felt as though that was what you wanted." She lowered herself to her knees as well, so that their eyes were at the same level. He flinched, but did not avert his gaze from hers. "You're right," he muttered, barely audible. "There was a time when I did want that. A long, long time ago. But still I descended those stairs. I couldn't let myself just toss aside what I had sacrificed everything to attain." "Even knowing there was only suffering to be found at the bottom?" "That's exactly why. I had to own it, just like I have to own my mistakes now." "I see. Then I shall observe and see where this path takes you." Ah, what a wretched man, she thought, smiling. She was an experienced enough maid to know to keep that thought to herself, though. And she herself was also a wretched woman, who had wanted to die alongside her love at the top of this very tower. But in her broken mind, those memories had been transformed into a fairy tale. The full moon had begun its descent by the time they left the cold chamber. At the collapsed section of stairs, Jacopo crossed first, as he had going up. The head maid then made to follow after him, but was instead greeted to his hand extended across the gap. She tilted her head. Obviously, he was offering her assistance in crossing, but she had made it over with no difficulty the first time, so she couldn't understand why. Not to mention, the master of the house had no obligation to help a lowly maid. But bathed in the glow of the moon, her hand stretched out to take his, before she realized what happened. They had both lost those they cared about most. And when their fingers touched, he saw a bright, spirited young woman with an infectious smile. And she saw a kind-hearted and sometimes sarcastic young man. Giselle and the slave, vestiges of their long-forgotten selves, bursting forth for the tiniest, most insignificant of moments. Michael, to tell you the truth, I wanted nothing more than to descend these stairs with you, hand in hand. Morgana, to tell you the truth, I wanted nothing more than to go back to those days when I could still take your hand. By the time the headmaid had made it across the collapsed stairs, the shadows of their old selves had disappeared without a trace. Only the maid who always wore a smile and the forlorn businessman remained there in the tower. A faint connection had formed between them, though, a shared isolation and emptiness, an empathy as similarly damaged souls. But that too would fade in time, their connection as fleeting as an autumn night. With him leading the way, and her following behind, they descended the spiral staircase together. And what about you? He asked. Were you able to find that something about yourself here? Yes, she said. I believe I did. But I fear it will slip through my fingers again before long. You never struck me as the forgetful type. I have been for some time. I have no room for new memories anymore. Well, that's probably for the best, he said. It would be best if you forgot what you found here as well. Not a chance. My, she said. You are quite the intractable one. I could say the same about you. Say, master, what is it? I want to tell you something before I forget the things I felt tonight. Yeah? I was not terribly fond of you when we first met. That sounds about right. But that is not true any longer. Is that so? It is. The truth is, I thought you were the truth is, I thought you were creepy as hell at first. Didn't even want to look at you. That sounds about right. But that's not the case anymore. Is that so? Yeah, it is. For one called Lost, I thought that was going to be a lot worse. Um, I don't know. I don't know what I was expecting, but I agree. We need the buddy cop experience. All right. 2, Pain. Let's go into it. This might be the last one. It's a good story. Like they've got a very neat foil setup, which you miss because they never interact with each other. So, all right. 2, Pain. Beyond ending 4, a moment of hesitation. How can you be sure that even now I still love you? Can you deny the possibility that I no longer yearn for you, but the white-haired girl? Can you deny the possibility that my love for you has transformed into hate? Farewell, Michael. In a brief moment of hesitation, Michael had abandoned Giselle, leading to the worst possible outcome for the both of them. I forgot about this ending. No! I hate this. Yeah, immediate pain, like, oh, no. I regret this. We should have ended on the last one and just never came back. The both of them, and one other as well, a young girl. The girl, however, remained oblivious to her fate. Are you sure you really wanted to let him go? The girl leaned back in a rocking chair before the fireplace, tracing her bottom lip with her skeletal finger. Her face was covered in hideous scars, a fitting look for the witch of the cursed mansion, but it was her devilish smile that left the strongest impact. The maid, who now remembered she was Giselle, was putting kindling on the fire, a task she had done countless times over hundreds of years. But this time, the circumstances were slightly different. Yes, I'm sure. Giselle looked up at the witch, distraught. Her already unnaturally pale face was almost entirely devoid of color. Just moments earlier, she had banished the man she loved. She had cast Michael's soul back into the void, sending it off with a wish that he would never find his way back to this mansion. I see, the witch said, still running her finger across her lip. I don't think I'll ever understand. If you hate someone, you should chain them down and torture them for all eternity. It was the perfect opportunity to trap his soul. I do not hate him, Giselle said, causing the witch's bony finger to come to a sudden halt. The witch raised an eyebrow, perplexed, but it was hidden in the shadow of her hood for no one to see. Oh, is that so, my dear? After everything you said, I simply assumed. I could never come to hate him. I could never want to see him dead or tortured. As she spoke, the look of dejection on Giselle's face deepened. However, there seemed to be a hint of relief beneath it, which the witch couldn't comprehend. Uh-huh. Then why did you say what you did? The witch extended her skeletal finger towards Giselle. Giselle sighed, saying, I don't think you would understand. Sometimes you kept your distance from someone you loved because you loved them. You sent them back to the mortal realm to live a normal life away from you, an undying apparition, because you loved them. You never wanted them to set foot in the cursed mansion again, because you loved them. The witch would never understand those desires. She would never understand telling someone, I don't love you, because you loved them. And she would never understand lying to push someone away because you loved them. Probably not, the witch said. I'm not particularly interested in understanding either. It doesn't matter what happened in the interim. In the end, nothing's changed, has it, my dear? You are still my darling, devoted maid. With enough time, you will once more forget your name. Giselle slowly closed her eyes. The witch was right. In time, the mansion would eat away at her until there was once again nothing left. However, she no longer felt any fear about losing herself again. Giselle had no one to wait for anymore. No. God, I'm having so many problems with this one, and I don't. Gonna have to steel myself. The opposite of setting something free if you love it. Yeah, exactly. Which meant she was free from having to despair about him never showing up now. She didn't regret her choice either. As she had shown Michael the events of her own past, she had come to realize that she was no longer that person, that she was merely an unsettling shadow of the woman he had known. And she didn't want to subject him to that. It's for the best. Giselle repeated that phrase to herself again and again. A devilish smile rose to the witch's lips as she watched her gaze slowly sink to the cold floor. What a wonderful world this is, she said. She was in complete control of everything after all. The cursed mansion existed outside of reality, an eternal prison where time held no meaning. What one soul perceived as a day could be a second or a year for another soul. The witch Morgana awoke from a long rest. She opened her eyes, and there was the fireplace crackling away. Before it knelt a woman with deathly pale skin, feeding the fire with kindling. Morgana had no idea where the maid got the wood. Oh, hello there. Good morning. The witch snorted. Good morning to you as well, my dear, Morgana said. How long has it been? Since when? Since you cast him out. Cast who out? The maid said with her usual smile, tilting her head. Which was all Morgana needed to hear to know what had happened. It's been long enough for you to have fully reverted, I see. Whatever do you mean? The maid asked. Oh, is this one of your riddles? When have I ever given a riddle? You're the one who likes to make everything you say sound mysterious, my dear. My. If you say so. Are you trying to agitate me? Of course not. Now, would you like to start your day with a cup of herbal tea? Morgana sighed. It seemed the maid had indeed fully reverted. She'd had the exchange every single time she woke up since the maid's mind had broken. And even though her own sense of time had dulled as well, having to answer the same questions over and over again was still frustrating. She was the one who had broken the maid's mind in the first place, though, so she also understood she had brought this on herself. I've told you this again and again. I don't need any tea. And what about breakfast? The maid asked. I don't need food either. As I've also told you repeatedly. The maid pursed her lips into a little pout. Any food or tea you prepare is nothing but the product of a deluded spirit's imagination, and I would cast myself into the void before touching that, the witch thought, sighing. Then will you be doing your usual rounds of the house? The maid asked. I suppose, the girl said, gazing up at the dark ceiling. Her only real pastime was visiting the three souls trapped here and tormenting them, sometimes with words, sometimes with visions of the past, and sometimes with her own two hands. Gradually, bit by bit, she chipped away at their souls. As the master of the house, it acted to serve her will, and that influence was especially powerful while it existed outside time, which meant that she could do almost anything she pleased. And she had taken full advantage of that ability to torture the souls of the flaxen-haired boy, the beast-like swordsman, and the monstrous lord. She was more than willing to spend the rest of eternity exacting her revenge on the three of them. That said, she felt things were getting a bit repetitive, and with Michael banished, there was no longer any hope of outside entertainment, which left her the only one with the power to mix things up. It might be time to send them out again. The maid blinked at her, perplexed. But of course she wouldn't understand. She didn't know about the three souls imprisoned here. Are you going to release something from the mansion? The maid asked quizzically. I would never, the witch said, cackling. They've been placed under a powerful curse, a wish of destruction and reconstruction. And I am going to begin that process again, have them live their third lives. Oh, I can't wait to see what terrible ends they meet this time. Aren't you excited, my dear? Yes, very much so, the maid said, smiling as though she hadn't understood a single word. The witch jumped to her feet, giddy with rancor. Imagining the miserable, bloody futures the three terrible men would surely meet had fixed her mood in an instant.
Oh, there is absolutely a black comedy, like total irony in Morgana having to deal with an eternity of annoyance because she didn't think about the consequences of breaking Giselle's mind. Like, oh no, you have to have the same conversation over and over and over again. I feel honestly not that bad for you. Sorry, girl.
They had to suffer for all eternity. They had to endure a fate worse than death. They had to pay for their sins over and over and over again. Morgana first went to visit the flaxen-haired boy, whose soul was imprisoned in the rose garden. As she approached the double doors, they opened on their own, the rusty hinges letting out pained shrieks. On the other side lay a colorless, withered garden, a sad shadow of its once brilliant, colorful splendor. Of course, the witch felt no heartache over the garden's state of decay. A boy's shadow knelt on the ground, almost entirely encased in a briar patch. It was wispy and barely managed to retain its human form. Arms wrapped around his head, he muttered endlessly to himself. It's not all my fault. I can't take this anymore. Someone, get me out of here. Morgana stuck her chin out, looking down on the pathetic creature before her. Her last time here, he had been a bit more coherent, but now he seemed to be hardly there at all. The flaxen-haired boy's punishment was to relive the day that started it all, over and over again. He had to watch dozens of people die during the Harvest Festival celebration, including his own sister. And now that he'd finished his second life as well, she made him watch his mistakes from that as well. Such as the time he called his sister disgusting and pushed her away, the very same sister he betrayed the lakeside witch for. I never could have known that would happen. I just wanted a normal life. Someone, please, get me out of here. Would you like me to set you free? The witch asked. Only then did the shadow notice her presence, looking up at her with his featureless, empty face. What? The witch's smirk grew wider. I said I'm thinking of releasing you. If the flaxen-haired boy had any strength left to think, he would have realized that was all a trick, not a sudden display of kindness. But all he could see was an opportunity to escape, and he was going to take it. Please, let me go. He didn't even so much as wonder why. The only thing that registered in his feeble mind was the word free. Nothing else matters as long as he could escape this place. The witch's devilish smirk widened even further. Very well, then, I shall deliver your soul to its rightful place. You are very fortunate to have this chance to return to the mortal realm, my dear. Th- Thank you so much for your forgiveness.
Well, not quite. Sorry, man.
A contorted smile rose to the flaxen haired boy's face. He then whisked away into nothing, leaving behind only a small breeze to rustle the witch's robe. It took all her strength not to burst out laughing. Thank you for your forgiveness? That was brilliant. She hadn't said a thing about forgiving him. Farewell, Mel, the witch said, tracing her lip with her bony finger. We'll meet again soon, she said. The witch's parting words this time were not, until our souls cross paths once more in the boundless sphere of fate, because she hadn't released him from the curse, so his fate was still bound to her, even as he began life anew. And so as long as he remained subject to the curse, so did the soul of the girl who meant so much to him. Next, the witch went to visit the swordsman. His soul was imprisoned in the cellar, from which the stench of blood and flesh emanated. After losing his mind, the twisted killer began destroying everything in sight, while howling in some incomprehensible tongue, perhaps his native language, perhaps not a human language at all. The witch was, in truth, not looking forward to this visit. While the cursed mansion was indeed her domain, her own little realm of the dead, she was still just a regular soul herself. If he were to catch her off guard, he could very well damage her soul beyond repair. The witch held the greatest grudge against the barbaric lord, but she remained the most cautious around the swordsman. With an exasperated sigh, she opened the cellar door. And, exactly as she expected, a barely humanoid beast leapt at her the second she did. Stop this instant! She shouted, pointing a bony finger at the beast. In the realm of the dead, it was willpower and not physical strength that ruled, which meant that while the witch had been a helpless girl in life, she was the most powerful being in this domain. At her command, the beast froze mid-motion, a katana held high above his head. He stared wide-eyed at the small girl standing before him, beads of sweat forming on his neck. The beast shouted something in some inhuman tongue. The witch glanced around the cellar. It was littered with corpses, blood stains on every surface. Perhaps among the bodies was even the woman he called his tether. The witch turned her golden eyes back to the beast. In life, she had been terrified of this man. So scared that she had resorted to opening her door for the flaxen-haired boy, hoping to ask for his assistance. But now there was no fear, only glee at having him entirely under her thumb. How would you like it if I returned you to the realm of the living? She asked with a devilish grin. The beast stared at her blankly, his form shifting into something faintly more human. You are still torn between your two greatest desires, aren't you? You thirst for blood, and yet you crave a quiet life at the same time. You've already fallen once, lived at a beast, but that wasn't enough to satisfy you. So perhaps the only way to quench your thirst is with the other desire, peace and quiet. And I'm offering you another chance to have that. Do you mean it? The shadow's hands were trembling. It took the witch everything in her power to not start cackling at the sight. That abhorrent killer, shaking like a lamb. Yes, I mean it, she said with a smile. The katana fell from the beast's hands, letting out a loud, high-pitched clang when it hit the hard floor. As the sound echoed in the cellar, it sounded almost like 1,000 ghosts screaming. So you do want to go back to being a man after all? The shadow dropped his head in a crude imitation of a nod. A hideous beast and his most benevolent savior. It was a scene that could have easily taken place between him and the white-haired girl in his second life. Of course, the witch's intentions were nothing like hers. And by the witch's mercy, the beast was freed. With his disappearance, the countless bodies stacked up in the cellar vanished as if they had never been there. Only the smell of blood remained to remind her of the carnage. The witch then burst out laughing, unable to hold it back any longer. Oh, that was brilliant! Do you really think you'll ever be able to find peace? No, you'll just kill whoever holds you back, and then descend into madness, no matter how much you resist. And this time, you're going to turn everyone on you, and die a sad, miserable, gruesome death. Her cackling echoed in the cold cellar for some time. Her final stop was to see the man she despised more than anyone, the Lord, that monstrous savage. The mere thought of him filled her head with a pitch-black rage. He had ruined her life and tainted her soul. He was the cruelest, most barbaric of all of them. He held disgusting blood Sabbats, turning a saint into a spectacle. The witch despised all three men, but her loathing for the Lord, the ultimate root of her suffering, was far, far greater than the other two. She made her way to the den on the second floor. Cigarette smoke seeped out into the hallway, a smell as sad as the man waiting inside. When she opened the door, a cloud of smoke escaped, and only then was she able to see inside. Sitting on the edge of the billiards table with his head drooped was the third shadow, again barely able to maintain a human form. A few seconds later, he noticed the witch's presence and stumbled off the table, shuffling precariously towards her.
Yeah, I just imagine Morgana sitting at a desk, tapping away at a typewriter to put out a script for their next play since getting writer's block. Look, occasionally she has to poke them a little bit and see if she's got a new idea for them.
He extended a hand for her in grief and overwhelming regret, but the witch only saw it as a threat. He was trying to hurt her, as he had done so many times in life, to save himself.
"Don't you dare touch me,"
she said, causing his hand to freeze in the air. It formed the chasm between them, boundlessly wide and unfathomably deep, one he would never be able to cross. "Rejoice, Lord," the witch said with a devilish grin. "I'm setting your soul free." The shadow just stood there, staring at her. He didn't rejoice at the news, and in fact seemed to be rather upset by it. He opened his mouth to try to say something, but only strained gasps escaped from his lips.
That's what happens when you spend like a million years sitting there smoking in this room. There we go. You know she's just got this list of like, oh, I bet this would really tick him off. This is how he'll really suffer.
The witch tilted her head. The other two had been thrilled to hear they were being set free, so she was not expecting this reaction. "Ah," she said with a nod. "I see what it is. You realize that was a trick, and that I'm really setting you out to your third doom. I suppose being the Lord for so long, you would need a sense for danger." The man was desperately trying to communicate something to her, but with each attempt to use his voice, it only got less and less comprehensible. If he couldn't speak, then he would have to try something else. So he dragged his legs forward towards the witch. "You will never lay another finger on me," she commanded, pointing a skeletal finger at the shadow's feet. Heavy black chains, strongly reminiscent of those that had been used to seal the observation tower's door, appeared from the floor and wrapped themselves around his ankles, digging deep into his skin. The shadow fell to his knees, and the sound of rattling metal echoed in the den. Oh, what a sorry sight! The former lord of a large territory and the head of a mafia family, on his hands and knees, utterly helpless. How does it feel being looked on by a mere commoner? It must be absolutely humiliating. The shadow screamed, still mostly indecipherable, but more so than before. His intense desire to get through to her was beginning to show an effect. The witch cackled, glaring down at the pathetic creature before her. She knew how prideful a man he was. He was undoubtedly trying to assail her with curses and promises of vengeance. And oh, how delightful it would be to completely break him. "Go on, my dear. Tell me how much you despise me. Take it nice and slow. You can do it." She crouched before the shadow, peering into his eyes. He didn't have a face to read an expression from, but she could still feel his desperation. He groaned and grunted until finally he was able to form words. "I want to make amends." The witch froze. It took her several seconds to comprehend what he had just said. Had he just asked to make amends? The Lord, the man who had held those dreadful blood Sabbats, tortured slaves for fun, and was concerned only about satisfying his own desires, wanted to atone? For what purpose? "I made you into the witch. I will do anything you want. I want to make amends." "Shut up!" The witch stepped back away from the Lord. She was rattled, and her face contorted in confusion, luckily hidden by her hood. Right, this was just a ploy to escape from her curse. He was offering atonement in the hope that she would show him mercy. Well, he was a fool. She had no mercy to spare. The only thing she had in her heart was boundless hatred. Having regained her composure, the witch decided she would make him pay for attempting to worm his way free with an empty show of grace. She turned her gaze towards the shadow-cloaked ceiling and made a wish. In her mind, she envisioned the longsword the Lord had held above her head. And a few moments later, that very blade descended from the void. The time-worn sword rattled to the floor beside the Lord. Raising her fleshless arm, the witch pointed at the blade with a smirk. If you wish to atone for what you've done, you will have to suffer the same pain as I did. Take the blade, and with it, sever your own left arm. And should you refuse, that proves you a heartless tyrant only capable of hurting others, she meant to say, but couldn't finish. Uh, the sound spilled unbidden from her lips as a massive shadow made a thump against the dense carpet. Jet black liquid spurted from his left shoulder, staining the area around him. Look, you can't say Jacopo's not determined. Like, that man is decisive. He hadn't even hesitated. What next? The shadow plunged the bloody sword into the ground, leaning against the hilt for support. He was breathing heavily from the pain, but still he asked for more, knowing a single arm didn't compare to the agony she had been made to endure. The witch stared at him, flabbergasted. What on earth was happening? Was this the kind of man the Lord was? No, forget that. Regardless of whatever he was doing now, he had still locked her in the observation tower and killed her. He was a brutal, savage murderer, and nothing changed that. He had to be. He had to be. What do you want me to do next? What will bring you relief? Morgana. Silence! The witch's mind was a mess. Something seemed wrong, but her soul refused to let her see what. Pain that she had long since buried was drifting back to the surface. As anger and hatred bubbled furiously in her gut, she twisted her lips into a smile and proclaimed, "Very well then, as you wish. I'll let you experience the full extent of pain and helplessness I was made to suffer." And so, she put the Lord through all the pain and suffering and despair she had gone through in life, covering his body in wounds from head to toe and draping the den in a thick layer of black blood. It was the witch's very own blood Sabbath. The black shadow lay in a twisted mound in the center of the sea of blood, occasional strained gurgles the only sign anything remained inside. He had endured the entirety of her 16 years of life in the tiniest fraction of that time, and as a result, his soul was on the brink of disappearance. The witch was breathing heavily as well. In the process of administering his punishment, she had had to relive it all as well, creating brand new wounds on her soul. It had been centuries since she'd last been hurt by her past. "That's enough," she said. "I'm sending your soul back out into the world so you can begin your third life, and your third tragedy. I will never let your suffering end." Coughing up blood, the shadow lifted his head, shaking it weakly. He didn't object to the suffering, only doing it in the mortal realm. It had to be here, with her, where she could see it. He had so much he wanted to say, but only the strength left in his lips to put one sentiment into words. That he wanted to atone, of course. That was the only thing he truly desired. The witch bit her lip. These incomprehensible feelings he kept dragging out of her were driving her mad. And the very fact that she was unable to retain her composure was only a source of further agitation. "Are you incapable of saying anything else? If you're capable of feeling remorse, why would you do any of that to me in the first place? Why did you hold all those blood sabbats? Why did you make a spectacle out of me? Why did you torture your slaves for fun? Why did you call me a witch? Why did you lock me up and murder me?" He likely wanted to tell her she was wrong, but because not everything she had said was false, he couldn't. And he didn't have the strength or clarity of mind to explain it in detail. So all he could do was cling to his self-destructive wish for atonement. "I will never be able to understand you, Lord." The witch's mental state was beginning to shift again. Not for the better, though. The only person capable of untangling the massive knot that had formed was no longer around, which meant it would only continue to get more and more tangled. and she was starting to think she'd rather be rid of him entirely than have him suffer for all eternity. The longer she kept him around, the more chances he would have to beg to make amends. But she was done with that. She was done with the Lord's nonsense. And she was done with feeling like such a mess because of him.
Oh, Morgana, don't do it! No!
Okay, then, as you wish. This wasn't part of my plan, but I'll let you have your final atonement. As she spoke, she bent down and picked up the sword with her skeletal hand. By giving me your head. He didn't object, and he didn't try to run. Instead, he pushed himself up with his right arm, dropping his head and exposing his neck for her. Morgana looked down on him with disgust. She tightened her grip on the sword, pretending not to notice the faint trembling in her hand. Sorry, I got distressed. Apologies for the audio. Ah. Farewell, Lord. May your soul be forever extinguished from this world. With those words, she ended the Lord's life once and for all. And with his death, the truth scattered into the wind.
The fact that she killed him in the same way that he killed Lord Barnier, amazing. But also, no, Morgana. I know that there was no hope left for salvation anyways because Michael's gone, but also, oh no.
Morgana's robe was heavy with black blood. She was exhausted. She thought having her revenge would take a huge weight off of her shoulders, but instead she just felt lethargic. She wanted to get back to the warmth of the fireplace and go down for another nice long sleep. But when she opened the door to the hallway, "Have you finished your business?" She came face to face with the maid, her jade eyes glimmering unnaturally. Morgana took a half step back. What was she getting spooked for? She was the most powerful being in this domain. She was in complete control. The witch gave a little humph to mask her momentary stumble, then said, "Yes, I've finished. Now tell me, is the fireplace going? I'm rather tired and would like to rest." "But of course, Morgana. I put fresh kindling on the fire not long ago. It should be nice and warm for your nap." "Very well." Morgana lowered her gaze and made to leave the maid behind. But then she realized something seemed very wrong. How does the maid know my name? A chill ran down her back. If the maid's mind was still broken, she would never call Morgana by that name, because she believed it to be her own. Cold, jade eyes remained affixed on Golden. A smile spread across the maid's lips. The witch could not, though. "Are you Giselle?" If so, why? Why would she pretend to be mad if she still retained herself? What was her objective? Why was she wearing that unsettling smile if she was Giselle? Who on earth was she? For the first time, she felt something like fear for the maid, for Giselle. She was the witch, though. She was supposed to be the one everyone else feared. She was the master of the house. She was the most powerful being in this tiny domain. Yeah, except for the fact that Giselle no longer has anything to live for. So why did she feel like Giselle, of all people, had taken the upper hand? She had to have been imagining it. Giselle was her faithful maid, and she was the all-powerful witch. However, that dynamic only existed as it did because Giselle had Michael to wait for, her one source of hope and her weakness. But now that he was gone, and Giselle no longer had any hope, would she really stay in Morgana's servitude for eternity? "While you were asleep, I spent some time organizing my thoughts." "Is that so?" the witch said. "It is. After Hayden's death, you told me of the three men who wronged you, and as of your enmity for them." "That may have happened, yes." "And then you told me how you made a wish for them. A wish that they would undergo reconstruction and meet their tragic demises again."
Yes, what of it?
"Something about it doesn't quite sit right with me. I've only heard the events from your perspective, though, so I can only speculate on what it means. But a story told from one perspective is necessarily colored by that perspective. If the speaker believes something, it becomes true within that telling, regardless of the reality of it. I'm quite familiar with this phenomenon, as I have fallen into its trap before."
What are you implying? Are you trying to say I'm wrong about what happened to me?
"I cannot say. and the only one who could is no longer with us. Any chance we had of knowing the truth is now lost forever. However, unlike you, I was there with all three of them for their second lives. And in particular, my impression of the man on the third door, who you refer to as the Lord, does not line up with your depiction of him in certain ways. Would you really call him a heartless monster? Why wouldn't I? The witch said. He passed goblets of my blood around to noblemen like wine. Does that sound like someone who has a heart? Giselle didn't back down in the face of Morgana's intense glare. In fact, she took another step closer. Morgana was starting to feel like she was at a disadvantage, despite full confidence she was right. And what if you were mistaken about some fundamental detail? Mistaken? No, there was nothing to mistake. The Lord was a monster. He was one when he trained her blood for feasts, and he was one when he locked her in the tower. That was the simple truth of it. Why then did she feel like her chest was in a vice every time she told herself that? Why had her hands shaken before killing him? And why on earth did her mind keep imagining him a begging to atone as someone completely unrelated? For a heartbeat, a vision of that lonely graveyard swelled up in her mind. Standing there was the slave man, whose name and face and voice she had long forgotten. The one who had taught her kindness. I chose not to stop you, though, Giselle said. And why do you think I did that? Enough games. Out with it already. What are you scheming? Oh, I would never. I simply wanted one thing. For you to lose everything as well. The witch glowered at Giselle, who was still wearing the same lonely smile. She had no idea what that inscrutable woman was trying to say. She had already lost everything. That was what had driven her to become the spiteful witch in the first place, drifting outside time for all eternity. Giselle placed a hand on the witch's cheek. Jade and golden eyes locked, mere inches apart. And there, the witch gazed into the eyes of another witch. You surrendered yourself to hatred, becoming a witch who brandishes curses. And I surrendered myself to solitude, becoming a witch who brandishes desolation. This is a world too painful to live in if you don't love solitude after all. No, there's only one witch, me. And why might you think that? Because I'm the one who started it all. I'm the one who created this mansion, and I am its master. I bear more hatred than anyone. I'm the one. As departed souls, we're formed by our will and our emotions. How do you know my despair, sorrow, and solitude aren't stronger than the hatred that makes you? And then, with an unsettling cold smile that radiated pure emptiness, the smile of the true witch, she offered the girl one final thought. Can you be certain the Lord you killed was the same Lord? And with those words, that tiny, insignificant realm became devoid of even pain.
Damn, Giselle. Like, good on you, gaslight gatekeep girl boss, but holy shit. All right, I think we're gonna end here for tonight. Next stream is Tuesday, 10 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Pacific. Trying to think if I have any announcements. I don't believe I do. Thanks for hanging out. As a reminder, we're almost to the end of this game, so if you have another one that you'd like us to, or like me to play, just let me know in the comments. I'll be watching them for a little bit. And yeah, as a reminder, the link to our YouTube is below if you want to go check out any of our previous stuff. But other than that, thanks for hanging out. Have a good night, everyone. And thanks for hanging out.